In 2000, Nokia was everywhere, the most valuable company in Europe. One out of every two smartphones on Earth was a Nokia. They had 50% market share. They had a cult following. They had more engineers than Apple had employees. Then, between 2007 and 2013, they lost 90% of their value. Their phone division was sold to Microsoft for scrap, just $7.2 billion. By comparison, Apple makes that in 2 weeks today. Most people think Nokia was crushed by the iPhone, but the real story is darker. It's not about technology. It's about fear, arrogance, and a slow-motion suicide that everyone saw coming, except Nokia. This is the story of the $100 billion blind spot. Let's go back to 1998. Nokia was the first company to realize that phones weren't just for calls, they were for status. The Nokia 6110 introduced the world to Snake. The 3210 let you change covers. The 3310 became a legend because it survived being run over by a car. But behind the fun, Nokia was brutally efficient. They had supply chains that could ship 500 million phones a year. They had R&D labs working on flexible screens, touch interfaces, even a phone that doubled as a game console, the N-Gage. They filed more patents than Samsung and Apple combined. In 2005, Nokia's market cap hit $250 billion. They controlled the entire stack: hardware, software, distribution, retail. Carriers begged them for exclusives. Consumers upgraded every 18 months. It felt permanent. Finland's economy was Nokia. 1/3 of the country's growth came from that one company. Politicians called it the miracle. And that miracle bred blindness. Here's what almost nobody knows. In 2004, a small Nokia team built a fully functional touchscreen phone. It had a color display, an app store concept, and a web browser. They called it the 770 Internet Tablet. It was years ahead of the iPhone. But when they showed it to leadership, the response was brutal. Nobody wants to type on glass. Our physical keyboard phones sell 10 million units a quarter. Why change? The battery life is only 3 hours. Unacceptable. So they killed it. Instead, they doubled down on their existing software, Symbian, a system designed in 1998 for phones with buttons and small screens. It worked fine for the feature phone era, but the future was coming. Between 2004 and 2006, Nokia spent over $15 billion on R&D, more than Apple's entire revenue at the time, but almost all of it went into hardware: better cameras, tougher cases, longer battery life. Software was an afterthought. Meanwhile, a little company in Cupertino was quietly building a phone around one idea: that the software is the product. On January 9th, 2007, Steve Jobs introduced the iPhone. It had no keyboard. It had no replaceable battery. It couldn't even send picture messages at launch. By Nokia's internal metrics, it was a bad phone. Nokia engineers ran tests. They dropped the iPhone. It broke. They froze it. It shut down. They typed on the glass. It was slow and inaccurate. Their official internal reaction, quote, "The iPhone will never replace the business phone. It's a toy for rich people." But here's the fatal mistake. They didn't realize that the iPhone wasn't competing on durability or battery life. It was competing on experience. The multi-touch screen felt like magic. The web browser was a real computer. And most importantly, the App Store, launched a year later, turned the iPhone into a platform. While Nokia was still making phones that required a stylus and a manual, Apple made a phone your grandmother could use, and that's when the death spiral began. From 2008 to 2010, Nokia tried everything, but everything was too late. They launched the N97, a touchscreen phone with a hardware keyboard that still ran Symbian. It was slow, buggy, and flopped. They launched the 5800 Express Music, their first full-touch phone. Reviewers called it the phone that feels like a prototype. Inside the company, two factions were at war. The old guard wanted to keep Symbian. The rebels wanted to throw it away and build something new. They actually did build a new OS MeeGo. It was beautiful. The N9 phone got rave reviews, but leadership refused to commit. They kept hedging. Meanwhile, Google's Android was free, easy, and getting better every month. Samsung, HTC, and LG abandoned Symbian overnight. By 2010, Nokia's market share had dropped from 50% to 30%, then to 25%. The board panicked. They fired the CEO, and in a move that would go down in business history as the worst decision ever, they hired Stephen Elop, a former Microsoft executive. Elop gave a speech called The Burning Platform. He told employees Nokia was standing on a burning oil rig and had to jump. His jump? Abandoning both Symbian and MeeGo to use Microsoft Windows Phone. It was a disaster. Windows Phone had 2% market share. Carriers didn't want it. Developers didn't build for it. By 2013, Microsoft bought Nokia's phone division for a fraction of its peak value, and then wrote off the entire purchase 2 years later. So why did Nokia die? Not because they lacked technology. They had touch screens first. They had app stores first. They had amazing hardware. They died because of strategic arrogance, the belief that their past success guaranteed their future. They saw the iPhone, they saw Android, and they said, our customers don't want that. But customers didn't know what they wanted until Apple showed them. Today, every company faces the same test. Blockbuster saw Netflix, Kodak saw digital cameras, Nokia saw the smartphone. The question isn't, do you see the future? It's, are you willing to kill your own business before someone else does? Thanks for watching. If you want more stories of billion-dollar failures, hit subscribe. And let me know in the comments, what company do you think is next?